There we go. Today, I'm going to give you a little synopsis of the workshop. So this is roughly a 90-minute workshop, which will facilitate the understanding of terms in decolonising education, and it will improve the attendees' clarity as to why the approach is taken for curriculum design and delivery. Then, using a wheel framework and taking stepped approach, the knowledge and understanding of attendees will be explored, challenged, critiqued, improved, and developed to enable them to move forward with applying the approach. Poems, songs, and videos will be integrated for further understanding and bringing forward the reality and rationale for taking the decolonising approach for curriculum delivery and design within institution. So I'm going to hand over to our lovely presenter today, Musharrat, who will take you through this. And again, if you have any questions, if you save them until the end, and if we do have time and you want to come on mic and camera to ask a question, then that'll be great. So I'll hand it over, Musharrat, and I'll kind of be around in the background looking at the chat and everything. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Welcome for attending this workshop. I hope it's going to be useful. I'm going to start off with a song, and throughout this whole presentation, it's going to be a bit clunky because I'm going to come in and out of my presentation with songs, poems, and other videos just to help us understand the reality of doing this approach. So I'm going to start off with this song. So I'm going to stop sharing and then share again. Bear with me. Has it stopped sharing? Because it's not stopped sharing for me.
Currently, it's just stopped sharing now.
Okay, great. And now I am going to share the song. This is what's going to happen through the whole thing. I apologize, but you'll see why I'm doing it. Sure. And it might be a bit quiet, so you might have to turn up the volume, but hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Is it sharing? Not yet.
Not just yet. No. Oh, there you go. Something's loading on my end.
That's the present.
Yeah.
Sorry, we did try it, Elliot and I. It did work. We'll do it again. Here we go. Hopefully you can see it now.
Lovely. That's it on my end. All right, I'll mute. Musharrat, just mentioned, did you share with sound on your end?
Yeah.
Can't hear anything currently.
Okay.
That's it. I think it's coming through. Oh. I heard something then. Double what they do so you can level them. That's it. Perfect. Right.
Okay. So I've shown that video because it kind of sums up decades of discrimination, disadvantage, and the outcomes of institutional racism. And I think the song by David Santan sums it up and kind of sets the tone as to why we are now looking at decolonising as an approach to higher education. So this is the learning outcomes that have been advertised. I'm just showing them to you just to remind you. Hopefully this is what I'll deliver by the end of this workshop. So we're going to go to a Menti now. So if you go to menti.com and punch in that number code 51487654, and I will share my screen again. Go to Menti and share my screen. So you'll see the number on the slide as well if you haven't quite caught it, and we shall see what you come up with regarding the question posed. So don't worry, you'll see the slide in a moment with the actual number on it. I told you it's a bit of coming in and out, but hopefully you'll stay with me for the presentation. I'm just trying to find it on the slide share. Hopefully you'll be able to see it in a moment. And there you go. You should see the number at the top. It's 51487650. And I'm asking the question, why are you interested in doing the decolonizing the curriculum or education? I've got one response, racial justice, which is relevant to increase inclusivity. Got another response. Increase belonging, yes. Yeah, that's 3 responses. I think there's about 10 or 12 people. Hopefully we'll get a few more. To increase equality for all. Yeah. Student voice. Yeah. Now that's really interesting. I mean, there's this theme of, I think, overall belonging, caring, well-being, in a way, representation. And I think it's really important to understand that it, as David Santan said in his song, it's not about equality. And the reason that's being said is that what we want is belonging for our students and staff in higher education, but also what we want is equity. You know, representation matters, but it doesn't matter if the same status quo is being felt and delivered. So yeah, that's great. You can keep on adding to that if you wish. I'm going to stop sharing and come back to the presentation again. Thank you very much. Okay, so I've broken up this workshop into 4 parts, and this is part 1, starting right, no compromise, knowing who the people in power are, and that's really important. And what I want to also just remind you of is that there are approximately 60 to 70 government commissioned reports across 4 decades informing us really over and over again institutional racism, discrimination and disadvantage is real and harming Black, minoritized and marginalized people and communities. In relation to health and social care and education, the common causes of these disparities are poverty, housing, unequal distribution of resources, and inequity in accessing services. In higher education, there are many reports also identifying that challenges and disparities continue to exist, showing similar repeating data findings and outcomes, the outcomes being of little or no change over decades. There needs to be authentic, radical transformation commitment to gain traction on changes required. On the slide are some example reports on higher education. And when I use the term radical, I'm referring to moving away from the status quo. And when I refer to transformation, I mean coming out of struggle. So what is stopping the sector across the piece from consistently strategizing, monitoring and evaluating, and keep on developing and paying attention to change that is impactful and sustainable? Well, Seddon tried to explain this in his 2008 book, Systems Thinking in the Public Sector, The Failure of Reform Regime and a Manifesto for a Better Way. He put forward that the problem identifying approach is taken and the change approach is applied is already assumed, instead of the problem being interrogated, identified with the very people, groups or communities the change is meant for. The current approach to problem solving is not within the systems thinking approach, but as Rittel and Weber in 1973, they named that public sector problem solving or service improvement is like solving a tame problem. And a tame problem is a stable problem, and a clear and agreed solution can be found. For example, a mathematical equation, or analyzing the structure of a chemical compound, or applying an arbitrary rule or target to a service. And the problems in higher education are not stable, and this kind of remedy does not work and can sometimes make things worse. To get the juggernaut, and the juggernaut is higher education, to move, it takes a team with leaders dedicated to the work and able to hold people in the institutions to account. It needs resources, which means money. It needs planning. It needs a trial and error and learning approach from the trial and error cycle, just like any service improvement work, really. But when change is to do with anti-racism, extra barriers are put up to start the change, and not as you would do with service improvement usually. So I'm going to just read out some of the outcomes from a few of the reports. I'm going to start with the Winchester Asian Awarding Gap Report 2021. The report found that factors including social and cultural isolation, lack of representation, and racialized experience both in and outside of formal learning and teaching played a part in the higher education experience of the University of Winchester's Asian students. This is largely in line with previous studies carried out within the sector, which have investigated the racial degree awarding gap. Yet these new findings show how Asian students navigated through these experiences in very different ways. The students taking part in the project, who mainly came from South Asian backgrounds, highlighted the significance of cultural values which placed importance on the role of family in their lives. While students clearly valued the strong relationships they held with their families, notably their parents, the report considers how this may unintentionally place an academic burden upon students. However, importantly, the students themselves did not perceive such relationships to have a negative effect on their lives. Another report from 2020, Arriving at Thriving, it was a survey of over 500 diverse groups of disabled students. And the report states, in the area of teaching and learning, students described a picture of inconsistency and frustration. 26% of respondents rated the accessibility of their course as only 1 out of 5 or 2 out of 5. This response from students due to a lack of accessibility, regularly being physically unable to get to or sit in lecture theatres or academic spaces, unable to access online or physical learning materials, and not receiving the reasonable adjustments set out in their support plans, including adjustments to assessments. And then there's the LGBT in Britain university report by Stonewall in 2018. This was a survey of 522 LGBT plus students, and their findings were 2 in 5 LGBT students, that's 42%, have hidden their identity at university for fear of discrimination. 7% of trans students have been physically attacked by another student or member of university in the last year. 2/3 of LGBT plus students, that's 69%, say university has equalities policies that protect LGBT plus people on campus. More than a third of trans students, that's 36%, and 7% of lesbian, gay, and bi students who aren't trans face negative comments or conduct from university staff in the last year because they are LGBT, and the last year is in relation to the 2018 report. So the data tells a story, but not the only story, but data is necessary to hook those higher in the institutions to put a pause on their usual way of thinking. You have to have a clear rationale as to why the decolonizing approach is taken over any other approach. You have to do some unlearning and learning yourselves and develop a depth of understanding to be authentic in applying this approach. A meaning and description of decolonizing knowledge is useful to start understanding the concept. You also have to know and understand the history and background. The slide shows a description of decolonizing knowledge. It makes links to history, harms, and injustices that has led to people wanting decolonization. African studies scholar Dr. Sabelu Ndlovu-Gacheni explains that Latin American thinkers focus their decolonizing research topics on Euromodernity and its consequences for the global South. For them, coloniality became identified as the basis on which Euromodernity was built. Hence, decolonizing became necessary for liberation at freeing the world from global coloniality. And Ndlovu-Gacheni continues, there emerged the very colonization of being human, separated into human and subhuman. Those who were denied humanity automatically were denied epistemic virtue. We cannot run away from the racism question. Note, I don't say race. Racism is the problem. Racism is the unfolding of Euromodernity and has provided validation for the organizing principle of the hierarchization of people, the hierarchization of knowledge, and constructions of power structures. Decolonizing is a movement. It is political, anti-fascist, it is for reparations, for equity and justice, it is for anti-racism. Decolonizing change is formed from centering the very people that have been harmed, othered, and pushed to the margins. And humans are categorized as superior or lesser according to the colonial yardstick, and the contents of the colonial yardstick are white, male, Eurocentric, heterosexual, able-bodied, Christian, educated, and well-off. And as we're in the UK, English-speaking, English accent. And I'm sure you could add a few more. Everybody else is othered and viewed as lesser. Before I carry on, I just want to explain some terms. Euromodernism is both a philosophical and arts movement that arose from broad transformation in Western society during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Coloniality refers to the control and management of knowledge, what is disseminated, who is doing the disseminating, what language dominates, and so on. Knowledge is measured by universals of Eurocentrism and capitalism. Epistemic means relating to knowledge or to the degree of its validation. I just want to remind you, race is a social construct based on the fallacy that there are different types of humans. I'm going to give you a quote from Grossfeugel, 2011, and his description of racism. Racism is a global, open quote, racism is a global hierarchy of superiority and inferiority along the line of the human that have been politically, culturally, and economically produced and reproduced for centuries by the institutions of the capitalist, patriarchal, Western-centric, Christian-centric, modern colonial world system, end quote. Patriarchy is based on the belief that heterosexual men are biologically and intellectually superior. Capitalism is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by state. And the word decolonisation, that's the theory. The word decoloniality, that's praxis, creating the environment, the conditions to enable disrupting of the production of knowledge from being primarily Eurocentric episteme. And decolonising then are the actions of disruption, that is the actions to change Eurocentrism in education and enhance the curriculum, not about subtraction of existing knowledge. So decolonising the curriculum cannot move forward without decolonising the university. It needs the leaders on board to role model and change culture, and it needs money and resources, as well as outcome measures for the identified actions for change on the shop floor. In February 2021, myself and two others, Pamela Thompson from Centre for Research in Teaching at LSBU. At that time, she was also co-chair of Equinet, which was a staff network for Black and minoritized groups, and Firdaus Janital, Students' Welfare Officer at the Student Union. We presented our Act for Change group's decolonising vision for the university to the academic board. It was unanimously approved by the board. Commitment to the vision statement means actions needed to be strategized across the university. We had people in power in the university behind us to enable us to move forward. This is essential and fundamental. Decolonising is a whole institution approach. It cannot sustain in isolation by, for example, just changing your book list. The decolonising approach is for all faculties in the university, and each faculty has a lead at our university. I am the lead for the School of Allied Health and Community Health. So I'm going to go on to the next video. I'm not going to show all the video because of time, but it's about the discipline of architecture. And hopefully it will come through, she says. I've given myself extra work, haven't I? But I think it is useful to see it. Okay, sound on first, and then there we go. Let me know if you can hear it.
That, at present demands of us.
That's coming through on my side.
More food for thought about how do we make those spaces so that everybody belongs. And I think what Dr. Lashaba said, there is no discipline that is immune from this call of decolonisation, is fundamental. And I think Professor Linda Tuhahi's quote kind of brings it home. The colonizer, open quote, the colonizer did not simply design an education system. They designed an education especially to destroy indigenous cultures, value systems, and appearance. And Professor Linda Tuhahi Smith is from New Zealand, to add some context to her quote. So that's the end of part one. We're moving to part two about the process, which is around collaboration, interrogation, and reconstruction. So In academic year 2021-22, I was given a year's sabbatical to immerse myself to gain better understanding of what does decolonizing mean in curricula and higher education. What does it look like? It was part of an outcome from the sabbatical that I carried out a scoping review to understand what type of literature there was and what was the literature all saying. The wheel framework was an outcome from the sabbatical created by me from the themes of the scoping review. I have an imagery of a wheel because decolonizing is about continuously evaluating, monitoring, and evolving. I steered away from any curriculum change framework that linked to terms such as inclusion, because inclusion is still an invitation to the master's house. People in power are still giving you an invitation and asking you to change under the same structures and policies, which in the long term will lead to little or no change. I'm leading the decolonising strategy for allied health education. I am supporting the staff to embed this into their curriculum. It is thinking differently, away from the traditional ways of delivering or assessing, giving feedback, all of it, even admissions and marketing. Another unexpected outcome from my sabbatical was that a post was created for a permanent decolonising research fellow to direct the university. We were able to hire to the post, and Mega Kashyap has been moving all of us forward in the decolonising work. Change happens when we do something, but we have to approach it through small changes and monitor for impact or for developing, and then when necessary, move on to the next change. Too many changes in one go destabilizes the curriculum or even the organization. I designed this evidence-informed will to help staff and students to start the decolonizing process, and you start at the center. The center is the linchpin of the wheel. Centering the voices of Black and minoritized students is in line with the decolonizing curriculum method and authentic principles of co-production. The students should be equal partners in the change making, but they cannot be equal if they are the only unwaged persons around the table. The inequality sets up the difference in power dynamic at every level of the transformation process, not only for development, but also for monitoring and reviewing. It is important, if students are helping us in this way, that they get paid a living wage to equalise the space of influence, as it is unequal power dynamics if the students are the only unpaid participants around the table. You centre the very students harmed by the unjust curriculum, because if you get it right for them, then all students and staff benefit. Bettina Love discusses the concept of mattering, that students feel and know that they matter to the institution and not there just for capital gains. The spokes of the wheel are 6 of the themes identified from the scoping review, from which to start the deep interrogations. The course picks one at a starting point, and as it is a complex, if you start somewhere, you will go everywhere. Say you start at the spoke category of decolonising assessment feedback to focus on individuality that is linked to equity. If the student does not understand their feedback, there must be an automatic principle for them to have a one-to-one and not to limit the number of times they can do this. Just think about it. How many times will students come back for repeated one-to-ones? But even so, isn't it our job as educators to support students' learning? And also you have to look at the rubric, the feedback paperwork as well, and interrogate why that isn't working. Any changes we make must be authentic co-production and step away from consultation. Bettina Love, in her book titled We Want More Than to Survive, And although the book is based on American education systems for BIPOC students, it discusses that one size fits no one. Standardization is about best minimum, and we must add individualization to change, and students want this from their teachers. Whichever spoke you start at, know why you want to start there, what are the concerns, what does the data say? Outcome measures, yes, we have the corporate measures, but we need to have meaningful measures that matter to the students and staff too, if we are truly in it together and centering the voices of students. But institutional responsibility is fundamental in enabling decolonizing curricula and universities. Strong leadership, investment, monies and resources, especially giving time out to staff to work with students and consider the changes required. This work cannot be added to current teaching and research chores of staff. I am now given 2 days a week to work on Decolonising Allied Health curriculum. I can't always fully commit to the 2 days, but I do use it and have advanced us in allied health due to this. This infographic is a good summary of privilege and power, a good visual about intersecting identities and how they can lead to multiple layers of advantage, but also multiple layers of discrimination and disadvantage. Intersectionality is a legal term brought forward by Kimberly Crenshaw, meaning that your intersecting identities come together to disadvantage you. Kimberly Crenshaw provides an example from her PhD regarding intersectionality. One of the cases being of Ahmed-Landeryou, an African-American woman who in the 70s sued a local General Motors car manufacturing plant for discrimination. Emma felt she was not considered for the job she had applied for because she was a black woman. The judge threw out Emma's suit because the employer hired African Americans and hired women. But the judge didn't check that the African Americans hired by the manufacturing plant usually worked at the back in industrial jobs or maintenance jobs and were men. The women who were hired were white and usually held jobs in secretarial or front office work. Rather than broadening the frame of consideration in Emma's case, the court failed to recognize how the work policies enacted double discrimination. Because they didn't see this, for them there wasn't a problem, so nothing to solve. There is also, I want to bring to your attention, an academic wheel of privilege, similar to Sylvia Duckworth's wheel of power and privilege. And it's important to know that you have to get transparent. You have to expose what is going wrong to be able to interrupt it and then reconstruct a better way. Because if you create a reimagined way forward, applying the decolonizing approach, it will benefit all. So I'm going to show another video, which is the voices of Black students from different disciplines in relation to decolonizing the curriculum. I'm trying to stop sharing so I can share. Bear with me. A bit clunky, it's taking its time. Okay, there we go. Make sure I included the sound.
Decolonising the curriculum is diversifying the.
So out of the mouths of students, how clearly they articulated what decolonising the curriculum meant for them. And it's really clear that they're talking about belonging for all and to make things better for all, but centering the people who are currently harmed by the system, which is what decolonising the curriculum is about getting to that highest point of intersectionality to get the widest possible solution that benefits all. So next, if you go again to the menti.com and answer the next question, how can students join with staff to collaborate in making decolonizing changes? And I'm going to share the window so we can see some of the responses coming through, if we can get some responses. Here we go, active collaboration. I like that. Active is really an important word here. Co-creation, absolutely. Have them right at the start to design how we're going to do this, how we're going to go forward. Got 2 responses. Maybe we can get a few more before I move on. I think it might be a bit slow, but I might have to stop sharing and move on. I don't know if there's any more responses. Paid roles, spot on. That's right. If we're decolonizing, we can't be still carrying on with the master-slave position. Everyone comes to the table as equals when it comes to money. Yeah, everybody's paid who's around the table. Fantastic, really good, really good. Thank you. Amazing. I'll stop sharing and then go back to the PowerPoint. Thank you so much for your patience of me coming in and out. So we're going to go to the part 3, which is responsibility and accountability. And I'm going to read you a poem. Now, if you want to just sort of stand up, move around, go and get a coffee or something while I'm reading the poem, that's absolutely fine, because there isn't an actual break in this workshop. So this is the poem. Equal access to unjust systems is not liberation. More people of colour on pedagogically unchanged reading lists is not salvation. And no number of black and brown faces in universities can fundamentally undo the racism. Just because they give you a seat at the table doesn't mean they want you to speak at the table. It's a virtuous invitation that reflects well on the host, and the only thing that's better than a generous institution is a grateful beneficiary who'll follow the key rule that people of colour should be seen and not heard, fit for open day handbooks but not safety in academia. Equal access to unjust systems is not liberation. More people of colour on pedagogically unchanged reading lists is not salvation, and no number of black and brown faces in universities can fundamentally undo the racism. Just because they give you a seat at the table doesn't mean they want you to eat at the table. They make out that racism is the number of students of colour, but not that it's the underestimation of their knowledge, the exclusion of their histories and distortion of their names, the policing of their speech and a culture of surveillance. They make out that racism is the content of core modules, but not that it's that whiteness is the mark of valued knowledge, the processes that underlie the racist dropout rate, or the lack of mental health services that can understand race. Just because they give you a seat at the table doesn't mean that they'll take the feet off the table. They make out that racism is the number of academics of colour, but not that it's the treatment of the other black and brown staff, the cleaners, the caterers, the security on the door, not that it's the fees or the opaque decision-making. Equal access to unjust systems is not liberation. More people of colour on pedagogically unchanged reading lists is not salvation, and no number of black and brown faces in universities can fundamentally undo the racism. Just because they give you a seat at the table doesn't mean they're prepared to change the room. So I'm going to briefly discuss the 3 pillars of decolonizing the university. It's by Professor Leon Tickley of Bristol University. And these are the 3 pillars. It says occupational therapy there, but it's not about occupational therapy. That's my mistake. It's still on there. This is about university, decolonizing the curriculum at the university, democratizing the university, and decolonizing research at the university. So decolonizing the curriculum. Decolonizing the curriculum is about disrupting the 5 main monocultures of knowledge. 1, exclusive focus on westernized science and philosophy. 2, naturalization of difference between humans. 3, dominance of Western ideas of progress. 4, universalization of Western knowledge. 5, capitalist monopoly of knowledge production. Decolonizing is a whole systems transformation to enhance the curriculum by reviewing and acting through the perspectives of equity, justice and liberation, by integrating processes and knowledges that have been invalidated through systemic exclusion. Decolonizing is a university and curriculum lifestyle change. It's not abandonment or removal of the advances made by Western-centric knowledges such as medicine, psychology, sociology, and much more. And we must not exoticize or fetishize the knowledges from the global south, because if we do, we perpetuate othering and making it out to have less standing. Being at university is not an endpoint, not just getting a degree, not just getting a job. It is about learning about oneself, about the knowledge around and learning about the world. It's about starting to understand how you can impact the world, whether that be with family or community or wider. How can you do any of that if you're not invited to interrogate the discipline you are studying, how it enables diversity, how it excludes people and knowledges, how it impacts social justice? Social justice refers to a political and philosophical theory that focuses on the concept of fairness in relations between individuals in society and equal access to wealth, opportunities, and social privileges. Social justice is about revolution, uprising to disrupt the status quo. It's not a word for just stressing your papers. So, democratizing the university, this is challenging the institutional racism and discrimination perpetuated by policies, practices, culture, and leaders causing deep harm. People in power need to use their power to make radical change. They will profit if they do. The McKinsey and Company report identified remarkable profit gain between the bottom and top quartiles of companies in their dataset, which was 1,265 companies across 23 countries, and 590 of those companies were ethnically diverse, and they outperformed by 39%. The hook. You see, you need a hook for those higher up. And the report, the McKinsey report, the 2023 report, which is titled Diversity Matters Even More. There is a need to center the voices of the underrepresented, the structurally minoritized groups, and collaborate with them to bring the disciplines up to speed on the realities of the discrimination and disadvantage experienced by students and staff of Black and minoritized heritages from the current policies, practices, processes, and culture, to take heed urgently to start changing impactfully. Decolonizing is the complex interplay between politics, economics, knowledges from the global south, and human rights. People in power in universities need to equalize the space for underrepresented groups from Black and minoritized heritages. They need to be discussing the changes and doing the change work in collaboration. They need this to be visible to students, how they are doing the decolonising change in university reports, in outward-facing web pages, in course boards, in module launches. But what we see is the master-servant relationship replaying, where you have white leaders with a few or one worker of Black and minoritized heritages doing the hard labour of decolonising changes. We also see decolonising strategies being lumped in with equality, diversity and inclusion, EDI, without consideration of the difference. Decolonising and EDI have very separate histories and routes for action. EDI is a relatively new convention to keep the organisation in line with laws. Any action is meeting the needs of the institution, not necessarily the service users, staff and students. Also, and this is not popular to raise, but who are the institutions partnering with? Where are they investing their monies? If you are decolonising as a university, there must be review of this. For example, are you partnering with a country that has poor human rights? Why are you doing that? Is it solely for economic gain, or do you have a vision on how to work with the other organisation to contribute to justice and liberation within their nation? Decolonising as applied to an organisation is an approach which identifies the ways in which to disrupt Western centrism, white supremacy, and Western dominant systems of knowledge which have become universal as normative. Let me just describe a meaning of white supremacy, or sometimes you hear the word whiteness. It's an ideology based on the belief that those who identify as white are inherently superior biologically, intellectually and culturally, and this belief is then imposed and maintained through social, political, historical or institutional structures. So the next pillar, decolonising research. And decolonising research is really important because you have to think what's going on in the power dynamics. Ladders for Action, a non-profit organisation, analysed UKRI's funding behaviours. And UKRI is the largest grant funders for research in the UK. And what they found was that, for example, for during COVID-19 for research, 0% of research was granted funding for any research that had a Black person as principal lead researcher. And also they found that within the UK there are really not many full-time research positions for Black and minoritized persons. There's a little bit more for people of Indian heritage, but really when you do the statistics, it becomes 0 point something if it is a Black person. And so this kind of is replaying this master-servant positions, and research grant providers really have to interrogate how their application forms are written, putting an anti-racism lens to it to critique it, interrogate it, but also looking at their panels, how are they being trained, and revisiting their training in relation to reviewing grant applications from an anti-racism viewpoint. All the pillars raise the topic of institutional racism and discrimination, and this is the corrupted foundation that must be tackled as a matter of urgency if we are going to have authentic, impactful change. So change does start with us, but we also need to collaborate, and critical reflexivity is really important as part of us as individuals. Every decision we make, every action we take, we need to scrutinize how much of that has us in it. Our intersecting identities, our values, our cultural influence, our upbringing, these decisions and actions are not devoid of us. So it's important to understand, is it enhancing or is it hindering? So I'm going to go to another poem by Suhaima Manzoor Khan. Oops, let me stop sharing. And I'll go to her poem. Hopefully you can hear this.
Some poems force you to write them.
Humanizing, that's the word that comes to me. Humanizing. I can't seem to see the PowerPoint. Has that come up at all?
We can't see it on our end just yet.
Let's see.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's popped up now.
Great. So we're going to do another Menti. This is not going to be a word cloud. So you'll see the number there, and I will go to it. So let me just find it. And hopefully you'll be able to see what you type. It will sometimes comes very thick and fast, open-ended statements that you put down. So we'll try and capture some of them as they come. It's probably a bit slow. And I think that's due to my internet. So the number is 6138-1793. Unity of purpose and sense of fulfillment. Yeah. Feeling engaged, excited about change. Yes. We all benefit from inclusion, kindness, understanding. Yes, yes, definitely. Global perspective, more love and respect, more enriched. Yes, yeah, absolutely. The thing that Suhaima Manzoor Khan says is the humanizing, change is constant. It's, I'm going to stop sharing. It's kind of permanent in our lives, change. And it's how we then approach that in what way, and understanding authentically what is that all about, why are we needing change, and being honest about that and being vulnerable about that is really important. Organizations need to think about well-being, collaboration and co-creation in its authentic principles, which means being transparent and exposing the organization themselves to interrogation, and understanding that interrogation is to make it better, not for anything else. So coming up to the last part, which is end thoughts. Let's see. So justice and equity is key to attend to embed in the foundations of the DNA of the organizations, to change, to facilitate decolonizing education, enable spaces for a diversity of students and staff to be creative and innovative in the change making, Justice in curriculum is about choosing to broaden students' worldviews through creating opportunities to integrate different perspectives and challenging belief systems, but also as learners, the support systems being ready for the widest possible learner differences. The principle is all are welcome, and the organisation doesn't go into crisis when something different appears in front of them. Equity in curriculum is about increasing engagement among students by helping them feel connected to a curriculum that shows relationship to their sociocultural groups, hence impacts belonging and career progression once qualified, but also have supports in place that enables everyone to be successful. If justice and equity are not attended to first, then diversity and inclusion will not sustain, will be transient, will be temporary. The reason we need decolonising is to disrupt the current situation and to embed justice and equity as business as usual. Always remember, decolonising is expanding our social perceptions, understandings and connections, and tapping into our cultural heritage and stories that shapes modern societies for the better. This is a quote that I go to quite a lot. It makes me think of those disruptors, those activists, co-conspirators in education to transform higher education for the better. In times of profound change, may I be a learner and creator of a new world. London South Bank University, LSBU, has been ranked third in the world for reducing inequality in the established Times Higher Impact Ratings 2024. The ranking, based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, measures universities' research on social inequalities, their policies on discrimination, their commitment to recruiting staff and students from underrepresented groups. With over 2,000 institutions participating, LSBU's outstanding performance in the Times Higher Impact Ranking 2024 demonstrates its work as a university to reduce inequality. So, in summary of this workshop, what's needed? Learn and unlearn through reading up on and understanding what is meant by decolonising education in the UK. Know your context, the data, the challenges, bringing in students round the table as equally waged. Interrogate what is going on. Be an activist. Review and reconstruct collaboratively, identifying problems, remedies, and how to measure success. Like the wheel framework, there is a constant checking in and evolving process, but you have to just start somewhere, on one of the spokes of the wheel, if you like. Resources and monies must be set aside for the work in strategy, not a one-off, but continuing support. So I'm going to go to my last song. Let me stop sharing and find my last song. With sound. Here we go. Let me stop sharing and come back to my PowerPoint. I feel that song. I feel that song really deeply. I want to take you to a quote by Trey Sales, founder of Vocal Type Company, and he's quoted as saying, "When a singular perspective dominates an industry, regardless of technological advancements, there can only be one way of thinking, teaching, and creating. This lack of diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, and gender has led to a lack of diversity in thought, systems like education, ideas, and most importantly, creations." End quote. In education, we have known better for a long time. The data has been talking, but we haven't done as much better as we should have. The decolonising approach is a way to do better radically if let in systemically. I hope the workshop has given you some clarity as to what this approach is and how to start. Just start. Okay, that's my presentation completed. Thank you very much for being
Perfect.
patient with me coming in and out of the presentation.
Yeah, it was
I
amazing.
hope it's
Thank
been
you.
helpful.
Yeah. I've noticed we're a little bit short on time, but we have there's a question in the chat from Manoa earlier, and then I think we had one hand up, so we'll see where we get to. But Manoa's asked, in the wheel slide, the term performative is used versus impact. Can this be explained?
It's saying don't be performative, be impactful. And because there are still universities using the word that they're taking the decolonizing approach, but they are not taking a university-wide approach. And it's very clear in decolonizing, it's a whole institution approach. So you can't be decolonizing a module without decolonizing the whole university. So it's saying don't be performative, be impactful, meaning that let the people that are harmed by the injustices be part of the change, but the change is felt by everybody. I hope that explains why I had the word performative in there. It's like don't be performative.
I think what I'll do now, just because there's no questions in the chat, I'll enable everyone's mics and cameras again, and then if anyone does have a question in the last 5 minutes, I've used the raised hand function, and we can go through those. So you should be able to do that now. Perfect. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to come on mic or camera.
Did you
in the
did you-
meantime, I
Did you
think there
say
were
someone had their hand up before?
They did, but it's gone away, so I'm
Okay.
not too sure who it was. Just in the meantime, there was the odd person in the chat who had some volume issue during the video. So would it be possible just after if we just share the links to those videos
Yeah,
in particular, and then people can
definitely.
rewatch them after anyway? That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, I don't know if you want to expand any further on it. We had a comment earlier from Ignatius that the second poem that you went through on YouTube, they found it very powerful. So yeah, yeah, that's good.
I think I just want to add that change like this is emotional. It does hit the heart, it hits the mind. And that's important because, as I think Sipos et al.'s 2008 University Transformation Framework says, you have to get to the head. So get to the head, understand why this change is needed, then it grabs the heart. Once you've grabbed the heart, that means it matters. And once it matters, then the hands start moving, meaning actions start happening. So it's really important that you understand who you're talking to and how you're going to get them to buy into the proposal of decolonizing approach. And that's why it's really important you understand what it is, what does it mean? Because the challenge is, as Dr. Lashaba says, is if you can't explain it, they immediately think it's not worth doing it. So understand how to communicate decolonizing the curriculum.
Perfect. We've got about 3 minutes left of the proper session time. Does anyone else have any questions? Or if anyone wants to jump on the mic, or if you've got any comments that you want to give? Yeah, Lucy, you've got your hand up. Do you want to pop on the mic?
Hi there, thank you so much. That was really fantastic, really insightful and rich. One thing I suppose I'm interested in something you didn't mention. I'm just curious to know what your feelings are about this, or perhaps at LSBU, and that's around critical race theory, and in particular as a part of critical race theory to do with interest convergence. You know, of kind of like how do you get white
Yeah.
elites kind of on board with what you're doing, which I think you inferred to a lot in what you were talking about with the institutional racism and leaders. But I just wondered if you had a particular view on that, because I know that there's a lot of institutions that are kind of veering away from, talking about CRT, especially in the States. Yeah, just wondered what your views were on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I do talk about critical race theory and critical whiteness studies as well. So I approach it through those two. And interest convergence is very important. That's the way you grab the people in power to come with you. So that really matters. So you're right, Lucy, that is really part of how you get the people with money to come with you. As much as the Ferrarian idea that the grassroots will uprise and get the leaders to see the change. Actually, the reality is the people with the money still hold the direction of how we do things. So you need to grab them. And really that sabbatical I took, when I presented the results from the scoping review and the wheel, it grabbed two people high up in the institution, and they supported the change and have been continuing to support the change because they could see it's about everybody. But you start at the knottiest, hardest place. I hope that answers your question.
That does. Thank you so much. Cheers.
If anyone else has a really quick question, we've got about a minute left. But if no one else has any other questions, thank you for coming along. It's been a really good session.